38, and Mr. Nakeda apologizes for being late. Let's go to item number. Let's go down to item number 2. Presentation of FY 2017-2018 revenue estimates and preliminary budget. Mr. Ressa.
Yes, sir. President Gandra, Dr. Espinosa, members of the board. Tonight we start a series of budget workshops for the purposes of approving the budget that you're charged with adopting. That is the general fund budget, the debt service budget, as well as the child nutrition program budget. Now today we're going to concentrate primarily on the general fund budget. And so what you have there is our agenda. We're going to look at our general fund revenue estimates. We'll look at the state funding formula and recapture scenarios. We'll look at the legislative proposed appropriations of important bills. We'll look at the proposed budget and those cost drivers. We'll look at the preliminary budget by function, and then we'll discuss the budget workshop that's going to come up. Hope you don't mind. I'm going to get some water because all of a sudden my mouth went dry. Okay, so just quickly, with respect to our general fund revenue, 3 areas: local revenue, local tax collections. You're looking at state funding and federal funds. And this pie chart really represents just the significance of how much we take into consideration our state funding, because it represents about 74% of our funding. So when we look at our tax collections, we take 3 things into consideration. And you're going to have to just bear with me. So there's 3 things we have to look at. We have to look at the tax rate, and right now we're not proposing any increase in the tax rate, although future legislative inaction might result in us maybe proposing something to the board. The tax rolls. Currently, the tax rolls that we're projecting is $8.9 billion. That's an increase of about 4% from the prior year's certified values. Keep in mind that we're going to receive our preliminary values in April, and then we'll receive our certified values in July in time for adopting the tax rate and estimating our rollback rate. Now, our tax collection rate that I'm going to use is 98.5%. Historically, for the last 7 years that I've been here, I've always used 98%, but we've always collected more than our budget. So I think it's time for me to kind of bump it up to about 98.5%. I don't know. We'll see. Perhaps I might go to 99%, but right now it's at 98.5%. And then finally, for every penny of taxation, we generate $890,000 in tax collections. Now let's look at our state funding formula. The 3 variables that we look at are attendance, we look at our weighted average attendance, and we look at our property tax collections. At our property values that are set by the state, the comptroller's division, okay? Now, I'm projecting a 1.46% increase for next year, and that's based on the information that we got from VLK and Templeton demographics, okay? I'm also projecting the weighted average daily attendance to increase proportionately. Weighted average takes into consideration all the special populations. And then we're looking at the property values set by the comptroller's office. Now, these values are set by the state. They come in a year after the values, and they're projecting a growth of 4.96%. I wish it was lower, but that's what the state is projecting. Now, what's important to keep in mind is this. There's an inverse relationship between these values and state funding. The higher the state values the district, the lower state fund revenue we're going to get. And also, usually the values, because they're a year behind, and if you're a growing district, you get the best of both worlds. You get higher tax collections because they're new values, and because the state's coming in behind, the year behind, ordinarily those values are lower, so you get additional state revenue. If we're ever a mature school districts and our values start going down, we're going to hit 2 kinds of hits. We're going to take lower tax collections, and because the state's always a year behind, they're going to look at higher values from the prior year, and they're going to reduce our state funding. So let's just keep that in mind. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk about our state revenues, because I think it's important that I want to highlight something for the public here, and that is the state's share of public education. Now, public education is a shared responsibility between the state and the school district, okay? Now, what a school district has to do to get state funding is they have to impose a tax rate. They have to impose what's called the compressed tax rate, and that tax rate is 66.67% of what was adopted back in 2005. Once you do that, then you're eligible for Tier 1 funding. Now, keep in mind that for a majority of the school districts back then, they were at $1.50, so their compressed tax rate is $1. Socorro was lower. We were at $1.35, so our compressed tax rate is a little over 90 cents, okay? And when you look at that, the basic allotment pertains to attendance, and the special populations pertain to full-time equivalents. So what's our basic allotment? The basic allotment currently is $5,140. However, because our compressed tax rate is 90%, we get $4,709. Now, there's adjustments that are made. Some of those adjustments don't apply to us. If a school district has an ADA less than 1,600, they get an adjustment, a small district adjustment. If they're from 1,600 to 5,000 ADA, they get a mid-size adjustment. There's also adjustment for the cost of education index. This was a study that was done back in the 90s where the state realized that small school districts couldn't compete against urban school districts because they paid higher salaries. So they did a study comparing school districts' surrounding salaries that were being paid by the surrounding school districts. And they came up with an index. Ours is 1.15. So when you do that adjustment for our allocation, we get $5,210 on an average daily basis. Now, I want you to keep in mind this. This is just the maintenance and operations side. We also get additional money for the debt service in the existing debt allotment and IFA. When we add those amounts, that number goes up to a little over $6,000 per student on an average daily attendance basis. Now, the state also then gives additional allotments. They surely give you the transportation allotment. They give you a high school allotment. We get about $3.9 million of that. Also, those special populations, they have certain weights to generate additional revenue. And then there's also the new instructional facilities allotment, NIFA. Now, right now, sorry, I don't know what to do.
Keep going. Keep going.
Test, test. Test, test.
Is this a sign? I mean, is this a sign? So, with respect to Socorro ISD, we did receive NIFA funds because we opened up Purple Heart. And we're going to open another elementary a year from now. So it's important for us that the legislature could continue to fund NIFA. Okay, now, this is what we're projected to get in Tier 1 funding for next year using the variables that I talked about. We're looking at about $298 million in Tier 1 funding, okay? And you'll see those allocations, okay? Now, what the state then does is they back out what's called the local fund assignment. The local fund assignment is the compressed tax rate multiplied times the value set by the comptroller's office, okay? Now, as values go up, but no changes are made to the basic allocation, what happens to the state share of Tier 1 funding? Anybody want to guess?
Go slow.
It goes lower. And what you'll find is a lot of the growth that's happened in funding for public education is a result not because the state is putting more money into the system, but because property values at the local school districts are going up. So that's our Tier 1 funding that we're generating for, yes, sir.
But this is based on the old way of doing business. Now that the federal is going to send all those monies to the state, how is that going to change this?
No, but I think you're referring to maybe Medicaid, maybe you're talking about the public education.
No, the education funds is proposed that the federal, the tax monies are going to come in, and the federal government is just going to send it proportionally to every one of the states. And the state will do whatever they want to do with it.
Well, I think we're talking about another area other than public education, Mr. Gonzalez. I think you might be talking about maybe the
No, this is the
Department.
public education.
It's the block grant money, I
The
think.
block grant money, exactly, the grants that we're getting from the federal. And I'll make some comment about that later in this particular presentation. But I think we're talking about something different, sir. But we can talk about it later after this
Okay.
presentation. Now, with respect to Tier 2 funding, this is an enrichment program. What the state says is very simply this. If you increase your tax effort, they will provide additional revenue for the school district, okay? And what they do is they'll say for the 6 pennies over your compressed tax rate, you get additional yield that's based on the Austin ISD property values, okay? And it's also based on the special populations, not only ADA, but also your weighted average daily attendance. Now, currently, the Austin yield is $74 per WADA. Now, both the House and the Senate's appropriations now include an increase in Tier 2 funding in the Austin yield to $99.85 for this upcoming year, and then a further increase of $100 to $106.37 in 2019, okay? And then the copper pennies are still the same, okay? So based on that, we're going to be generating $30.4 million in additional revenue over for Tier 2 funding. It's about $8 million increase from current revenues that we're getting for this particular year. And then we have what's called fractional funding. Again, 2 years ago, I went before the board. I asked the board to allow us to swap some of the copper money for Tier 1 funding, and it generated some additional revenue, okay? So I just want to bring this to your attention just to let you know that that bottom notation is the district will no longer require board approval or no longer needs board approval. It'll just automatically be placed into the formula, okay? So I just want to know that I know that Ms. Crocet and certainly Ms. Borrega are going to be heartbroken that I won't be going to CNI anymore to talk about copper pennies. So anyway, I know Anyway, so this will be the last time I mention this unless something comes up. But I wanted to make sure that I'm not going to be coming back to you in September for a resolution on this, okay? Now, I want to talk about recapture. Just bear with me a little bit. People will say, okay, well, how did this come about? Well, back in the 80s, Jimmy Vasquez, who used to be in charge of Region 19, was in charge of Edgewood School District in San Antonio. He was upset about the fact that no matter how much he raised his property taxes, he couldn't generate enough money to equal what some other districts, wealthy districts, could by raising their tax rate maybe 2 or 3 pennies. And so he went ahead and sued the Texas Education Agency. He sued the commissioner, Dr. Kirby, at that time. And the Supreme Court in Edgewood versus Kirby did agree with him. And they felt that this was inequitable and there had to be some kind of resolution. So the legislature created, certainly in Chapter 41, what's called the equalized wealth level scenario, so to speak. And what they're saying is very simply this. If you divide property values by your weighted average daily attendance, and if that result is more than $514,000, then you're considered property wealthy. Now, I want you to keep in mind one particular fact. It doesn't matter if a school district's economic disadvantaged population is 80%. If your population, if your equalized wealth level is more than $514,000, you're wealthy. And you're going to have to start recapturing some of that revenue, so to speak. And just for your information, our equalized wealth level is $150,000. Okay, so at Tier 1 funding, if it's $514,000 or more, it gets recaptured. In Tier 2, the 6 pennies do not get recaptured. But the copper pennies afterwards, if they generate more than $319,000, then those get recaptured as well. So just for your information. Now, why am I telling you this? Because I want to highlight this particular slide. If you remember anything about this presentation, it's this. The state share of public education back in 2005 was 48%. Now, to me, that's kind of shared. However, starting in 2018, that percentage is going to go down to 41%, and if nothing changes, it will decrease further to 38% of public education. And what are the reasons? One of them is what I just mentioned to you, the local fund assignment. As those values go up and the formula isn't changed, then the share or the percentage of the state's amount or effort goes down. And there's also recapture. Back when recapture first started, it affected only about 31 school districts, and it generated about $200 million in revenue for the state. Now, over 200 school districts are impacted, and it's generating $2 billion of revenue for the state. So when they say about we're putting this much money into the system, they're not. It's the school districts that are putting in that whether it be property wealthy or property poor. And then it's somewhat disingenuous because they'll say, you know what? It's not us that's raising the tax rate, it's the school districts. We're putting this much money. Well, they're not. And it's important for us to keep in mind that this legislature has to do something about increasing the basic allotment, because by increasing the basic allotment, both property wealthy and property poor school districts generate more revenue for them. Now, I want to talk to you briefly about Houston ISD, okay? Because it's something that's come up through the scenario, okay? Now, Houston ISD, this is the first year that they're going to become property wealthy. It doesn't matter that they have like 85% economically disadvantaged students. They are wealthy. So this year, the school board was upset about the fact that they didn't feel that this was right for a district like their size, and the fact that they were so poor with respect to their students' economic situation. So they voted, they campaigned against the election to pay back the state. If you're property wealthy, what you do is technically you have an election and you approve the purchase of attendance credits. That's what the terminology is, to pay back the state. Well, they campaigned against it, and the election failed. So what happens is the next thing that you do for a district that size is you detach property. So what the TA told them is that, you know what, originally it was about $17.2 billion in values. Well, now it's $8 billion. They said, you know what, we're going to detach $8 billion of your property, and we're going to give it to Aldine ISD, okay? Now look what's going to happen. There's three scenarios here. First of all, I'm a property owner. I own the Galleria. Now, Houston has the 20% additional homestead exemption. Aldine doesn't. So I'm a taxpayer, and I own the Galleria. All of a sudden, I'm going to be paying Aldine. They're going to give me my tax bill, and it's going to increase my taxes. That's one issue that's going to cause a lot of problems. The second issue is going to be that I'm Aldine ISD. I'm going to get all these values, which might lower my INS tax rate, but the state's always a year behind with respect to the comptroller's values. So those values are going to go up the following year, and it's going to negatively reduce my state funding. So that's going to impact the receiving school district. And third, I'm a taxpayer for Houston ISD, and all of a sudden, we lose $8 billion in values. Well, this is a maintenance and operation issue. It's not a debt service issue. They still have to pay the debt. So all of a sudden, my tax rate is going to go up because the debt service side still has to make up for that loss of values. So, but the thing is, there must be something about being the biggest school district, because this past month, TA, without any really discussion or any kind of hearings, decided that, you know what, we're going to make good on those school districts that are property wealthy and have that additional 20% homestead exemption. So they made a decision to give them credit for that. And it cost the state about $100 million, of which $60 million was for Houston ISD. So, I mean, now, all of a sudden, I just found out today that a couple of school districts are suing the state because they're saying this isn't fair. The Equity Center is saying this isn't fair. So, anyway, obviously, this is one of the reasons why recapture is a growing issue for the state, and why property wealthy school districts are also suing the state. Just one more thing, the board has reconsidered their decision, is going to hold another election in May to determine whether perhaps they ought to really just go by and start paying, the state back. So they'll probably owe $100 million this year, and then it'll go exponentially in future years. So my apologies for that aside. I just felt it was important to kind of discuss that. Okay, so let's look at our revenue estimates. This is our budgeted revenue estimates. For next year, we're projecting $360 million currently using the new Austin yield, okay? Now, when you compare that to our current amended budget in the general fund, that's an increase of almost $16 million. Now, the increases in the local sources are because of our increased values. It's the same tax rate, but because values are going up, we're going to generate more state revenue. Now, there's some other issues. There's some other items that have also increased, but next month when we give you the detail, you'll be able to see them specifically, and we can certainly answer any questions you have there. This is more of the aggregate. On the state sources, we're looking at about $11 million increase. $3 million are associated with our increase in our average daily attendance, and about $8 million are associated with a new Austin yield that's in the appropriations. And then there's an increase in our federal sources. We're getting additional revenue because of our SHARS collections, and we're also having additional money because of our indirect cost rate. So you're looking at about a 4.63% increase in our general fund revenue estimates. Now, these are projections for the next 3 years, as I always do. I think it's important for us to provide the board an outlook of how we perceive the next 3 years are coming up with respect to making certain assumptions. I don't believe in a 5-year. I think when you do a 5-year outlook, the last 2 years are more of a swag than anything else. So now, when you look at 2017, that $348 million revenue amount, that is what I think we're going to earn this year. the screen, the slide that I showed you earlier was budget. This is actual. So I'm estimating that we're going to earn about $3 million over our budgeted amounts. And then what you'll see in 2019 is that we're making an estimate or an assumption that our ADA is going to go up only 4.45%, and then in 2020 only 0.42%. And I'm using the estimates that were made by the VLK, report and survey. Okay, so now when you look at this particular scenario, you'll see that we're projecting only an increase in revenues of about $4.6 million in 2019, and a little under over $2 million in 2020. That's barely enough, at least in 2019, to be able to cover a raise at a 1.5%. So it's important to keep in mind that if we don't do something about the tax rate this year, we may be forced to do it next year, because next year we're opening up a new elementary school. And we're talking about a full year's administrative staff, we're talking about custodians, and we're talking about additional teachers. Just food for thought, okay? I just want you to keep that in mind. Now, I'm going to go quickly through this because there's a lot of information I'm giving you. I don't want to read it off. I just want to make sure that you're aware of it and you can read it at your leisure. With respect to the revenue estimates, the comptrollers came in at $105 billion, which was lower than the current biennium because of reduced income having to do with lower oil and gas revenue. Now, they also, last biennium, determined that they were going to do a $5 billion transfer to the highway fund. And in so doing, that lowered the revenue for this upcoming biennium. And if nothing happens with respect to state funding, the rainy day fund is going to be almost $12 billion by the end of this upcoming legislative session. Okay. Now, the House proposal proposes, the original proposal is about $5.2 billion more than what's estimated by the comptroller to receive in revenue. So, but they do include an increase in the Austin yield. And if they're going to pass that particular budget, then they would have to do a couple of things. They'd have to push off the foundation school payment in August into September to make it fit within the spending limits, or they'll have to tap into the rainy day fund. Now, with respect to the Senate proposal, their original proposal was spending $1.3 billion less than the comptroller's revenue estimates, and they include an increase in the Austin yield. So both of them include an increase in the Austin yield. And even with this information, state funding increases is still spending $1.4 billion than last year. Now, I want you to keep this in mind. This is the House Bill 21, which is proposing providing an additional $1.6 billion in public education. This is Huberty's bill. It increases the basic allotment by almost $200 per student, but it eliminates the high school allotment and it eliminates the additional state aid for non-professional staff. It lowers recaptures, and it provides a hardship grant for those school districts that are losing ASETAR, okay? And also it increases, for the first time, it adds a weight for those students with dyslexia, okay? Now, this bill has been through committee several times, and so now there's a substitute bill for it. And what it does, it increases the weighting for bilingual education, not much, it's from 0.1 to 0.11, and it increases the allocation for CTE. And it also extends funding in CTE all the way to the 8th grade level. So now the legislature does runs on these bills, and they're estimating that for Socorro ISD will receive an additional $5.4 million if this particular bill gets passed. We'll see. Now, just want to tell you that since the original proposal, the House have made some changes to their particular budget. They've added, they're wanting to withdraw $2.4 billion from the rainy day fund. They also want to reduce funding for the instructional materials allotment by $125 million. And they've also included an additional $1.47 in appropriations for the education budget. The Senate, by the way, has increased their original budget from their original proposal to $106 billion. They also eliminate the instructional allotment. The instructional materials allotment by $104 million. They eliminate the NIFA funding. They also provide an additional $360 million for TRS care, And what they propose doing is deferring about $2.5 billion of that highway transfer until the next biennium, okay? So just two quick bills. Senate Bill 3 is the voucher bill that's going from the Senate, although the House is declaring that that's going to be dead on arrival. And then Huberty has House Bill 22, which certainly proposes changes to the public school accountability system, okay? So it reduces the number of domains from 5 to 3. It would assign an A through F grades for each of the 3 domains, but not an overall rating to the school district or to the schools. And it would consider implementing the system until August of 2019, okay? Now let's talk about the budget. This budget has a 1.5% increase, general pay increase for the staff, okay? That's going to cost the district about $3.5 million in additional revenue. Just if you're interested, going to 2% would be an additional $1.2 million, okay? We're also including additional instructional positions because of growth. We're adding 25 FTEs. We're also adding additional instructional salaries for career tech education, high school end of courses. So we're looking for the EOCs, we're looking at 2 positions for each comprehensive high school. We're adding salaries for the early college high school. We're increasing the district's healthcare contribution by $25 per month. So we're going from $6,600 annually to $6,900. We're also increasing, we're budgeting for an increased grade level for the WIN campuses. We're budgeting startup for the new elementary school. We have to make sure that we bring on board the principal, the AP, and the custodian midway through the year. We're also budgeting an increase in the Rate 41 lawsuit. And then we're also budgeting an additional $500,000 for classroom furniture. Now, there's some additional cost drivers. This year, when we went through the department reviews, the departments will ask for additional funding over and above what we've allocated to them. Now, there were 2 departments that we felt it was important for us to increase their basic allocation. That was operations. We increased it by $450,000. We cannot continue to use committed funds or fund balance to be able to maybe fund some of these items. And also because of E-rate funding, we went ahead and increased their budget by $548,000. Now, the departments also requested additional positions. They requested about $6 million in additional positions. Many of these were positions that were requested last year and were not approved. The cabinet met and we kind of divided those positions into 3 different tiers. And we felt that certainly those that were considered tier 1 were going to be in the budget. So what you see there is the number of FTEs that have been added to the budget. You're looking at 27 for the transportation department, 5 FTEs for the maintenance and operations budget, 3 FTEs for the police services. We are making the part-time security guards full-time. There's 2 for finance and 1 for administrative services, academic services, and human resources services. In addition to that, we're also proposing adding 44 instructional aides at the campuses, and they'll be split funded between state bilingual, which is in the general fund, and Title III, which is federal. So you're looking at another $600,000, okay? Now, some of these positions are new positions. They have new job descriptions. So while we budget for them, they still will go to the HR committee for discussion and considered to be approved by the HR committee and submitted for approval to the board. Now, we also have a request for department FTEs at SPED. We're looking at about 12 FTEs. We're having that discussion, and we'll probably be looking at adding either all of them or some of them by the time we have the next committee meeting, okay? Now, this is our proposed budget, $371 million. Now, when you compare that to our current revised general fund budget, you're looking at about a $12 million increase, okay? Now, it's important to keep in mind is that our district has been growing significantly, and we've done well to be able to mitigate and control that growth. But at a certain point in time, overtime isn't going to cut it, and working people significantly is not exactly in the best interest of the district. So when you look at this, and we will give you, next month, we'll give you the detailed budget so you can see within each one of those categories where those increases are. You're looking at primarily increases of $9.9 million in instruction. Now, there is a decrease in staff development. Keep in mind that we've rolled over a lot. Currently, we had about $300,000 in staff development funds that we rolled over into this year. There's a little bit of a decrease with respect to social workers, $54,000. We had SROs that we've reclassified into police services. So there's an increase in student transportation. Again, you're looking at FTEs and salary increases. There's certainly a decrease in extracurricular activities. We are no longer providing additional supplemental materials to Pebble Hills anymore because they're a comprehensive high school. What we did is we would give them about $125,000 for 4 years while they became a comprehensive high school as part of the academics program. We're no longer doing that. There's an additional $1.3 million for maintenance and operations. There's a decrease in data processing, but I believe that has to do with some contracts that we've rolled over, and they bump up the budget. They weren't in the original budget. You're looking at facilities acquisitions, a $1.5 billion decrease. That's really just we've rolled over some contracts, and they weren't in the original budget. Now, we have $400,000 there for portables. I'm not sure if we're going to need them or not. We're still going to make some adjustments with the budget. And then you got an increase, a slight increase with respect to what we charge, what we budget for the Central Appraisal District and the City Tax Office. Now, this is a work in process. So we're still reviewing these numbers. I want to thank Mrs. Olson and her staff because they worked hard and be able to at least get you these aggregate numbers for the time being. But as we review them, we might find that we need to add something. We find that we might have double counted something. So it's still a work in process. But you'll get the detailed budget next time we meet. Now, what we currently have is revenue estimates of $360 million and proposed budget of $371 million for a current deficit of $11.1 million. That's where we stand, okay? Now, let me just go through this next slide, and I'll mention a couple of things. Things to consider, federal funding. Now, Mr. Gonzalez, when you talk about federal funding, President Trump's proposed budget for the Department of Education has a $9 billion reduction, or a 13% decline. And what they're doing is they're limiting funds for teacher training and after-school programs while ramping up investments in school choice programs. Now, the two things we need to consider is coming up. The differences between the Senate and the House's priorities might delay the adoption of any kind of future additional revenue or funding for public education. And we wonder whether the Senate, which is leadership has touted school choice, the bathroom bill, will push the idea of vouchers to make sure that, in other words, they might tell the House, you want additional revenue for public ed? Then give us vouchers. We don't know. That's a possibility. But it's important to keep in mind it's usually these type of the budget is usually kind of resolved in the latter part of May or early June, okay? And it's important to keep in mind is that first week in June is when we have to publish the date for the public hearing to discuss the adoption of the budget and the adoption of the proposed tax rate. Now, if we don't know where we stand at that time with additional revenue from the legislature, then we might recommend to the board an increase in the tax rate. Now, you don't have to approve that tax rate. You don't have to, you can approve half of it, but we certainly have to publish something if we need to at that time. So, next time we meet, we're going to give you a detailed budget for the three budgets that you will adopt at the end of June, which is the general fund, the child nutrition program, and the debt service. We'll also provide you detailed budgets for the workers' comp and the healthcare, because even though you don't adopt them until July through budget amendments, it's still, these are important funds that you need to have a chance to look at and ask questions about. We'll give an update on pending legislative bills if you want me to. I don't have to. I know that sometimes it's a little, tough just listening to me sometimes, so I apologize for that. And then we'll discuss the May 9th budget workshop. In a nutshell, that's my presentation. I tried to go as quickly as I could. A lot of the details will come next month with respect to where the numbers are. But I stand here, certainly. Are there any questions with this information?
Any question for Mr. Reza? Mr. Ayub?
Next time when we meet, or because you don't have it here, will you be able to give us any detail on any costs that have been eliminated, any program no longer needed, or any costs that where we may have saved some money or intend to save money this year going into next year? I know that there's always a little bit of budget dust of unfilled vacancy or we didn't buy as many tires as we thought or what have you. But did we have any areas of cost savings throughout the year that will hopefully impact the budget positive? Will you be able to tell us that, or I would imagine we have some, don't we?
Presentation, I can kind of go through and tell you where we've either eliminated some savings that are eliminated some budget items that are no longer needed, or if there's any certain cost savings. It's important to note that, look, with respect to our budget, we have to budget for our salaries 100%. There's always a little bit of budget dust with respect to salary savings, or what are called lapsed salaries. That usually translates to about 3%. That's usually about $4 or $5 million. I mean, you have to budget for salaries, but traditionally, not only us, but other entities and school districts always have a little bit of lapsed salaries and so forth. But I can certainly include that in the next presentation for you. But I think it's important to keep in mind that a lot of these positions that we're adding to this budget, we've kind of, they're coming in from the second. A lot of them were added last year, were requested last year, and we didn't approve them. But and we're growing. We're growing. I mean, it's important to keep that in mind. So we have held, through Dr. Espinosa and your direction, the tax rate for the last 5 years. And I want to emphasize is when you look at this scenario, the state's share has gone down proportionately. I think we've done a great job in making sure that we've provided the resources as well as the fine education to our students, as well as the support to our employees while keeping the tax rate the same. But we'll get you that information, Mr.
And looking at slide, and I don't know what number slide it is, but it was the FY 2017-20 revenue projection. You had 4 columns. They were color-coded.
Yes,
blue,
sir.
green, that one. I was just wondering, 1.3 ADA increase this year, then we go to 1.46. And what we're using here as numbers to do that is the VLK study as far as our projected growth. So we've been at this, I guess, just over half a year. Are their projections trending on what they projected? I mean, because we go from 1.46 to 4.45 and then 0.42. There's obviously a drop there, and I'm sure there was a factor that they mentioned that. But are we trending at the 1.3, 1.46?
Well, right now, actually we're a little bit higher in our ADA. We're about 1.4%, but I'm always projecting a little bit of a decrease the latter part of the school year, so I'm trending at about 1.3%. But I wanted to make sure I based it on a study that had been done. I think one of the questions that I had received from some of the board members were, how do you come across with these particular percentages? Because they do impact our revenues, right? Right now, we're trending higher, but they're saying that we're going to be leveling off next couple of years. So I felt it was important for me to highlight, using those numbers, what our revenue estimates would be given those particular assumptions. But I don't know, we're trending higher this year than, we projected a 0.5 or 0.5% increase, and we're at almost 1.4%. That's significant.
It's worrisome because my understanding, I don't know, Ms. Rodriguez can correct me if I'm wrong, apparently our very neighboring district, Clint, they're actually seeing a drop, and they're part of the growth pattern toward the east side, and so maybe because the housing is going up, I'm not sure. And so the concern there would be the drop that happens there. Now, once the legislative session is over and we've kind of gotten a feel for where we are with vouchers and charter schools and those types of things, will we be able to maybe take another look at this? Because at some point, whether it's minimal or pretty severe, these schools are going to take an impact on our ADA, and that's going to impact this. And I don't think when we had BLK here, we had factored that in.
Yes, sir. What we could do is maybe arrange for them to come back and then kind of give us an update on their trends. And certainly we can reflect what they're projecting into future budget scenarios and so forth.
Is it IFAS funding?
Yeah.
That's what we use to help us with bonds, correct? For construction?
Well, the NIFA is a program that assists school districts who build new schools to equip them. And it's $250 per student for those particular school districts to build a new school.
Okay.
Now, the bonds program that's the instructional facilities allotment, and that's the existing debt allotment. Now, I didn't talk about that.
Sure.
And so that's what we get for the, helped us to service our debt, our bond payment, so to speak. So there hasn't been any kind of discussion in the legislature that either positively or negatively impacts those particular programs. So they're going to stay. But it's the NIFA that would really help us. And there's some bills that would increase that amount from $250 per student to $1,000 per student. But the worrisome thing is that it's been eliminated under the Senate proposal. It would really help us. I mean, we generated about $450,000 when we were building Purple Heart Elementary, because we built that school. And again, it's for furnishing and equipping the school. And so there are some bills in the legislature that would not only be for new schools, but it would always be for schools that are being remodeled. You know, they allocated about $47 million for the NIFA program and only used about 15 or 20. So what they want to do is be able to maybe expand the scope so that more school districts could be able to capture those funds. So hopefully, we're hopeful that the House version gets accepted so that we can be able to provide an application and hopefully receive those funds.
I'm just curious on that NIFA funding. When we open a new school, do they base those $200 per head on the capacity of the school or the actual enrollment?
It's actual enrollment. It's actual enrollment. So what they do is they ask us for an estimate at the beginning of the school year, and we do it through the TEAS program. So we'll enter that information, and Dr. Espinosa has to approve it. And then at the end of the year, they'll get our enrollment through PEAMS, and then from there, they'll settle up and tell us, okay, this is how much you get. So, and it's really a 2-year program. So the second year, you still get some additional money, but it's not as much as that first year that the school is built. So that's how that works. So we're hopeful that the legislature will continue to fund NIFA. You know, so.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Reza, we are the state looking at revenue for the next year less than what we made, or they're kind of thinking that we are going to have an increase in revenue for the state for the next year.
So when you look at first of all, the comptroller's revenue estimates are lower than the current biennium. So there's less money than there is currently. There's lower. And so there's less money to go around. So bottom line is that there's a lot of, debating and working with respect to the bills that need to be certainly approved. So you have the House, who wants to provide additional revenue for public education through House Bill 21. You have the Senate, who has at least increased their original budget proposal and, you know, has discussed doing something for education. But when you look at their numbers, there doesn't seem to be anything that provide additional revenue for school districts, for public education.
Really looking at, if I put it in terms of my household, if I have, let's say, $50,000 budget that I'm going to receive from whatever jobs I have, and at the end of a year, I did receive less than $50,000, or I'm going to receive more because I got a new job and I got an increase. So what I'm trying to find out in those proposals that you're talking about, are you talking about a deficit for next year and the current amount of money, or are you talking of maybe that it's going to be an increase in revenues for the state?
So what I'm saying is that the state has less money this biennium than they did last biennium. And if they want to provide additional, if they want to continue to provide additional revenue for school districts, they're going to need to do two things. They either tap into the rainy day fund, or they'll do accounting tricks that they've done in the past, which is push off the last month's, the foundation's August payment for 2019 into September, so they're within that threshold. And so they have less money, Mr. Gonzalez. They're trying to figure out.
I know that they do have less money, but what I'm trying to get at is whether the state is thinking that next year, 2018, we going to get a decrease in revenue or an increase in revenue for the state?
I believe that they're thinking that there's less, a decrease in revenue from what they've received in the past. I hope
Because there's gonna be less
well, because
jobs and.
because they're
all that?
projecting certainly the oil industry certainly has suffered some decrease in revenue because the price of oil has gone down to about $45 to $50 a barrel, and before it was about $70 or $90 a barrel. I mean, that's one thing. Also, this past biennium, they approved transferring about $5 billion to the transportation fund. Now, they've got to take, and it was done, and there was also a vote for that. So all of a sudden, there's less state sales tax revenue coming in, plus you transfer some of that money to the transportation fund. They have less money to work with.
Well, I do understand that part. What I'm saying is that the state is, or as some people in the state think that we are going to get more revenue next year as we did this year.
And that's possible. But the thing is that because it's a 2-year budget, they'll give a projection of this is what we estimate, and that's what we're going to work on, and that's how we're going to set our budget on.
So we're
and
in the
then so-
middle of a 2-year.
So the state has a 2-year budget, right? And so they estimate the revenues, and they plan that 2-year budget based on those revenues. They might generate more revenue, and at the end of that biennium or the beginning of the next legislative session, the comptroller might say, "Look, we generated more revenue than what we estimated," and so they may decide to use it at that time based on the surplus that they have, or they might have less. Let's look at back in 2011. They estimated about a $30 billion a significant decrease, and it didn't come to fruition. In fact, they didn't have a deficit at all. So they have to go by these estimates. They're estimating less money than they currently have, and so they're trying what they can to be able to provide the resources that are needed for each one of these services.
I guess what I was just trying to get to the point that just as the state needs to be very careful as to where we put the comma or the decimal point, we need to do the same thing here.
Certainly, and certainly the Senate feels that way. I mean, that's why they're very conservative on their budget. That's why they're not providing additional money. That's why they don't want to touch the rainy day fund, what's called the Economic Stabilization Fund. But there's going to be $12 billion that's sitting there. I mean, if you're not going to use it, then they say, well, it's for emergencies. Well, there's nothing in the statute that says that you have to have 60 to 90 days of expenses in the rainy day fund. That's not what it was for. It was meant to be able to provide the legislature some funding to get through that particular 2-year budget. I know that sometimes when we talk about our fund balance will say, no, can't be for, and Lily's laughing over there. I mean, but this is different, in my estimation. And so the Senate doesn't want to touch it. The House is saying, what good is it going to do us if it's just sitting there? It kind of reminds me of the time when the Great Depression, you had John Maynard Keynes, who was a famous economist. And back then, the economic theory was the invisible hand, that the marketplace will dictate what's going to happen. You have to let the market take its course. Well, John Maynard Keynes says, you know what? In the meantime, we're going to all be dead in the long run if we don't do something. So why don't we do something? And he advocated for, consumption, the consumption function, and certainly fiscal policy. But what I'm saying here is they've got a lot of money there. They can certainly advocate or certainly tap into that, and that's what the House is doing. They want to tap at least $2.4 billion of that and use it for not only public education but other services as well. And I hope that the Senate would concur. Now, our senator is doing a great job. Our representatives in the House are doing a great job. Mary Gonzalez, along with the other representatives, are working to support public education. So the House sees that it's important. The Senate does also, but they're just a little bit more conservative view. We'll see how it comes to play. Each one has their proposal. There are some differences. One wants to tap into the rainy day fund, the other one doesn't. One wants to delay the highway transfer until the next biennium. The other House wants to go ahead and delay the foundation payment from August into September. So they're doing what they can to be able to fit these budgets. It's just we'll see what happens with respect to public education. And my guess is that it may not come to fruition until the later part of May. That's what I'm thinking. I could be wrong. I hope I'm not. I hope I am, because that gives us more direction, and I can certainly we can provide you. We'll know where we stand with respect to our budget and the revenue side. So right now we're at $360 million revenue. We stand to maybe generate another $5 to $6 million if the House version is approved and adopted by the Senate.
I'd like to commend you because last year, we approved a $5 million deficit to operate this year. And it's coming under that, $3 million. So you was conservative enough, you knew that we were going to have to spend that money, but next year, I don't know what's gonna happen. It could be that it will cut it again in half.
Yeah.
But, I'd like to commend you in that you was conservative enough to allow us to do what we did last year.
Well, thank you very much, but I also want to thank Dr. Espinosa and the board members, because it was a deficit budget. And, we did this and we presented it, and the board accepted it because we had a healthy fund balance. We did. We've had a trend where we're growing. We have more than 90 days of operating expenses in our reserves, so we could do that. Now, if we didn't have that, I don't know if the board would accept that. I don't know if I would recommend it. And so Lily's going to call me tomorrow, and I'm going to hear from Lily. But thank you very much. But again, we did it because certainly we run a tight budget. We also have good direction from Dr. Espinosa and the board. You give us a lot of good direction, and certainly you allow us to present this. The question is that we're growing. Our departments and our staffs need additional personnel. We have a healthcare fund that we need to certainly supplement and provide additional funding. And so those takes costs. And more than anything else, in my presentation, I wanted to show that the state has to step it up. That's not fair. That's not what I would consider shared responsibility. When their share goes from 48% and now it might go down to 38% if nothing's done. And the House is working on that. I hate to say this but it's the truth. When you read the literature, when you read the bills, it seems that the House is doing a better job in trying to provide additional revenue for public education. Some people might beg to differ.
Mr. Dessa, so I certainly don't want to, diminish the performance of the reduction in expenses or the fact that we projected a $5 million budget deficit, and we're only at 3.5. But just doing quick calculations in my head, that is deficit spending of about $420,000 a month, and we still have a quarter left in the current budget. So the $1.5 million we may come out, that's great news, but the reality of it is that the year isn't closed yet, right? And so where we are now is certainly not indicative of where we may end up, because we still have some time to go here. And so I'd like to see it stay that way, but I'm also realistic. We're not going to stop spending today. We can't. We've got a couple more months to go. My question, though, is the additional state aid for tax relief, the ASETAR funding, the elimination of it, does that impact us?
No, it doesn't. So let me just provide you some information. Back in 2005, when House Bill 1 was introduced and the state required school districts to lower their tax rate, they changed the formulas to provide additional revenue. Well, a lot of school districts lost so much local tax revenue that even with the increase in the formulas, they still were losing money. Socorro ISD at that time would be losing $15 million. So they provided this program called Additional State Aid for Tax Rate Reduction, ASETAR. And so we were receiving $15 million at the beginning of 2005 through ASETAR funding. But through the years, as they tweaked and changed the formulas, we've received enough money so that we're no longer receiving any ASETAR funding. But there are 200 school districts that are receiving ASETAR funding, and it ends this year. So what you have in House Bill 21 or the Committee Substitute 21 is that there's a program to be able to provide some kind of release. relief. But we're not impacted because we're no longer receiving ASETAR money. But those districts that are, they're impacted and they're going to be in a world of hurt. Some of those school districts are losing 15-20% of their budget in revenue. That's significant. So it's not impacting us, but at one time we were receiving ASETAR money. We no longer are. So it doesn't impact us, luckily.
Mr. Dessa, the proposal to eliminate rate 41 by El Paso Electric, is my memory correct that that impacts at about $1.5 million, or was it more than that?
My
Do you know?
I need to check that.
It'll be about the same as last time, 11% or something like that.
11%. So I mean, we're looking at about $8 million in our utility costs. I mean, that's what our budget is, so to speak. So look about $800,000 that might impact our particular budget. So
Okay.
I'll have to check those numbers, Mr. Franklin. Please bear with me a little bit.
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Any more questions?
Not now, thank you.
Mr. Dessa, thank you.
Thank you.
Go down to item number 3, employee on-site health clinic. Review the next step necessary for possible implementation of the SISD on-site health clinic. Mr. Campoya and Mr. Carmona.
Good evening, President Gandara, Dr. Espinosa, board members. So tonight, Mr. Carmona and I wanted to present to you an initiative that we want to implement here in the school district of possibly opening up a SISD-owned health clinic for our employees. So approximately 2 years ago, Dr. Espinosa approached me to start looking into the plan of opening up a clinic. And back then, I had tasked our director of employee benefits, which was Lori Quintela, to start looking at and researching the plan as to what it takes to open up a clinic. So I got involved with her. We did some research. We went and visited several clinics in the Dallas area. We presented to cabinet several options. So tonight we want to present to you one of the options that we believe, and strongly believe, would work for us. But before I start the presentation, though, let me tell you the options that we have. There's so many options in opening up a clinic, and you know, as we continue the research, even though it's been a couple of years or close to 2 years, we lost Lori Quintela, which she had a lot of information that she herself had researched. Then we hired recently Mr. Carmona, and now we're starting almost from scratch, gathering more information as well. So as we do research, the options are endless. You can do options, for example, contracted clinic employees that would be using one of our sites or facilities here in the district. However, those wouldn't be SISD employees. They would be contracted, which means that the physician may be John Doe today, and next week you may have Robert Ramirez as a physician. So you never get to form that relationship with the employee. Another option would be to contract a local doctor that would use their facility, and part of the facility would be designated for our employees. Similar to having like a VIP type of access. Now, in that case, that doctor would benefit from Socorro ISD's business and make tons of money. The other option is Cigna itself has an on-site clinic that they provide to school districts, but similar to the first option I mentioned, they wouldn't have that personal relationship where we get to know the same doctor. Cigna designates different doctors to different clinics all the time. And then the fourth one is going in to have SISD employees being the clinic employees with the exception of the physician, the doctor. The doctor would be contracted. That's one option. And the last option, which is the option that we want to present tonight, is having all the full clinic employees being SISD employees, including the physician. We strongly believe that that's the best way of going for our employees. So with that said, some of the areas that we believe and strongly believe are a benefit to our employees is, the health and well-being of all of our SISD employees is our number one priority in HR. Why? Because they're the ones that are teaching our kids. They're the ones that are making sure that the district continues to function. With their busy schedules, a lot of even our custodians, for example, don't get a chance to go and visit the doctor. We implement the wellness program full force this year with the approval of the board, and that's helping. However, convenience, we've noticed, is a big thing for our employees. They feel it's an inconvenience having to go to the doctor, even their primary care physician, and wait hours there to get attended. The other one, it's convenient and it's affordable, an affordable option for our employees, not only with the medical costs, but also with prescription if we go the route of opening up a pharmacy with the clinic. For example, and later in the presentation, Mr. Carmona will explain to you the cost. For example, right now, one of our custodians, bus drivers, goes to a doctor. They pay $25 to see the doctor, copay. With our clinic, we're looking at changing that or making that fee $10. So they're already saving $15 there. And then some of the plan as to what care would be in the clinic would be primary care, preventive care, physical exams, vaccinations, flu shots, small cuts, and minor injuries in the clinic. And then, of course, we'll have an on-site biometric screening place like LabCorp or Quest doing blood work there as well. These are some of the key points, that as we continue doing research, we kind of target these areas as benefit to our employees, convenience, cost savings. The second one, as we continue doing research, that stands out a lot from our clinics that we visited, strong doctor and patient relationships. In our employee benefits committee, we question our benefits committee. Relationships with their primary care physician is very important to our employees. The trust, loyalty, the reduction in absences, believe it or not, that some of the districts we visited, some of the districts we called, they report that they do see a reduction in absences. It's very hard to keep track and to maintain that data, but they do see a reduction in absences. Why? Because, I'll give you an example. We have our clinic on site, and our employees are seen immediately. They can go in at 7 a.m. and they're out by 7:30 before they start their workday at 8 o'clock. Or even if their workday starts at 7, they'll be half an hour late instead of being absent half day or full day. Of course, it's the on-site primary and preventive care, wellness, disease management, then the consumer and clinical decision support, and of course, it'll be HIPAA compliance, and then we have the provision of prescription medications. In our visits to the clinics, the first time that we went, we gathered some information. This time, I do want to thank Mr. Ayu because he joined us in the visits. We visited 2 clinics. Mr. Carmona and I have reached out to many others. For example, the 2 clinics we visited is Garland ISD and Mesquite ISD, and right now Mr. Carmona will go over what we discovered there. I've reached out to Conroe ISD over there in the Houston area, Allen ISD in the Plano area, Midland ISD, Keller ISD in the Fort Worth area, and Northwest ISD closer to San Antonio. And all of them have a clinic, and the similarity is the cost. They all charge $10. Now, the hours are different. Those are things that we're looking at. So today, our plan is to get feedback from the board. Do we continue looking into this and present you with the next steps? But before we get there, let me go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Carmona, who will be explaining to you what we discovered and what we found on our research, and then what our plan is.
Good evening, board members. Dr. Espinosa. As Mr. Campoya mentioned, early this month, or to be specific, on March 8 and 9, Mr. Ayu was kind enough to join Ms. Wilkie as well, Teacher Clark, and Mr. Rene Vargas, Finance Department and join us in a couple of visits to the clinics that Mr. Campoya just mentioned. On the 8th, we visited the Garland ISD clinic, and the clinic is known as what is typically referred to as a near-site clinic because the site is not a property of the school district. This is a building that's leased, and in addition to that, is considered a basic or minor type of care clinic because all they do is provide services for acute illnesses such as a sore throat and allergies. This is just a screenshot of how the clinic was advertised or marketed throughout the community. And again, this is how they have gained some of their customers. The clinic has been opened since December 2015. In addition to that, we visited the Mesquite site, and Mesquite to me was quite an eye-opener. Briefly, when I walked into the Garland Clinic, what you see is, think of a doctor's office, but at a smaller scale. Your lobby, your reception area, I believe about 4 examining rooms, a break room, and the office manager office, and so on. But when we walked in and stopped at Mesquite ISD, it was a completely different picture. You walk in, a little bit larger lobby, you see the pharmacy, you see the reception area. We walk into the actual area where the services are being provided. They have a nurse's station, examining rooms, a spot for the phlebotomist or the lab technician to do the drawings on blood tests. I mean, you name it. So as I'm seeing this, and as I'm hearing people talk, and as we're posing some questions, which I'll go over the answer to those questions, I'm thinking, this is, as we have on our logo or next to our logo, this is part of those endless opportunities, because as we go through facing different challenges to include other schools opening in our area, this is a win-win, because in addition to us to showing our employees that we're investing in their welfare, we're also invested in recruiting those employees, keeping those employees, in addition to that, save money on costs. This is the news release that was, also announcing and marketing, advertising the clinic over at Mesquite ISD. And with Mesquite ISD, it's somewhat of a unique situation because the city of Mesquite and Mesquite ISD joined a venture to where they develop a partnership and they see both of their populations, meaning employees from the city and employees from Mesquite ISD have access to the clinic. So of course the resources are greater. Yet, coming back, as I'm running all the information that was relayed and that was shared with the people that are handling the clinic, it was clear to me that the clinic is not a money-making machine. The clinic is not the answer to our deficit. The clinic is not going to solve the problem or the challenges that we have when it comes to our funding. Again, we're self-funded. Though it was clear to me, based on the conversations that we had, it's a cost-saving measure. So we have gone through a phase where a multi-year plan adjustment has been approved. And at this point, as of July 1st, we'll be going through phase 1. Then I think the clinic could be that other tool that we could possibly look into to further enhance our benefits in addition to having that cost measure. So some of the information that we exchanged is the early detection and management of chronic conditions, earlier treatment of illnesses or injuries, fewer urgent care and emergency room visits, reduce absenteeism as employees become healthier and need less time off for health-related appointments, reinforcement of wellness culture that can be tied into our Team SISD wellness initiatives. As you all might recall, we have, for this month, the biometric screenings throughout the school district, where employees have the opportunity to check their their basic lab work that we get on an annual basis. Improve retention of employees who appreciate the convenience of the clinic and the employer willingness to invest in their health. Improve the ability to recruit new employees. In addition to that, lower health plan costs as employees access preventive care. Recoup employers' investment with reduced costs for chronic conditions or severe medical events in future years due to early intervention. Stress the value of participating in wellness programs as a part of the strategy for improving employee health. All this is great because it's what our wish list is. But another thing that stuck into my head is the conversation that we had with Dr. Feltes, which is a physician over at Mesquite ISD. And one of the questions is, Doctor, why stay at the clinic? Why take care of our employees at a school district when you can be making more money at a hospital, possibly? And she said, for me as an employee of the school district, it's the convenience of being an employee of the school district. I'm not pressured to be at a private practice to where a patient, and I don't know if you have experienced this, but I have. As a patient, sometimes you become a new medical record number. And you're just mainly become that. You're part of the revenue. And you might be well taken care of and so on and so forth, but it's still a business. It's a practice. She said, me as a physician, I do what I like to do, and the reason why I became a physician, to take care of patients. I don't look at numbers. That's not my goal. My goal is to make sure that I take care of those employees who seek treatment from us. By default, she has been able to develop relationships with those employees because they see her as one of us. In addition to that, the staff have been trained when it comes to HIPAA compliance. They know that, and they're guaranteed to secure that their information is secure because sometimes we're hesitant. If we don't have that relationship, we're hesitant. She said, that's one of the reasons why this clinic has been open for 11 years. We know that technically speaking, if we look at our numbers and we look at cost, expenses, fixed cost, and so on and so forth, we're not making any money. But that was never the goal of this clinic. The goal is for us to be able to control cost. And I said, give me an example. How would you measure that? She said, in paper, it might be difficult for me to tell you this is the amount. But I can tell you this. If an employee walked in today, whether it's him or her or their child, and I was able to provide care to prevent something that could have become catastrophic, then we have saved already, because if something that it's being managed, like I said, there's disease management, then you are already saving money by not having that person not take care of their health, and then years later end up at the emergency room or possibly even as an inpatient at a hospital. Excuse me. We looked at data, and I think Mr. Ayub was somewhat tortured when we were reviewing our executive summary report over at the Cigna office, because he experienced firsthand what we review on a court.
For the rest of us, okay? And fasting. Yeah, and fasting.
And fasting, yes, that's right, we were fasting.
We needed to based on the car you got.
So, to give you a brief scenario of what we did that day, or what we do during those executive summary revisions is we look at 12-month worth of data, what we are experiencing as a group, what are our trends, our costs, and so on. So with that information in mind, we did a projection, and this is preliminary. This is just a projection. Let's say that we have participants eligible for access on an average number of employees of 4,948, or average number of members, that means employees and their covered dependents, 8,964. Potential of average number of visits the first year, if the clinic was to be implemented, we could potentially have up to 14,670 visits. This is the number of visits that we have experienced in a 12-month period as a group. Out of that number, the average preventive care visits have been 2,200, and the average health promotion visits is 660. So let's say that to give you a better picture or illustration, that we could potentially look at is we look at the participation level of 50%. That would equal to 7,335 possible visits annually, or 32 daily, which is more or less comparable to what Garland and Mesquite ISD are seeing. They did mention that depending on the season or the month of the year, that number fluctuates. But relatively, it comes down to around a 30, possibly, I think if I'm not mistaken, during the summer is when they saw the lowest numbers, between 70 patients a day to 30. And during the wintertime, for obvious reasons, the typical cold and so on and so forth, it's when those numbers increased. In addition to the numbers of the possible number of visits, we thought, so how would we need to staff our clinic, our pharmacy? And what we came up with is a primary care physician. Why have a primary care physician on staff? When it comes to the Garland ISD clinic, they do not have a physician on staff. They have someone contracted. So what happens is a patient walks in, they're seen by the nurse, and then the nurse will need to have a sign-off from the physician. So there's not that, like I said, relationship with a primary care physician, which is one of the things that we're trying to achieve that you might recall from the first or the presentations that we had in relation to the multi-phase plan change. A physician assistant, a nurse practitioner, a clinic manager, certified medical assistants. One of them will be in charge of medical billing. Technically speaking, what will be considered medical billing, because there will be no medical billing. It's our own clinic. So for billing purposes, we would have this person track number of visits, reason for the visit, so we can estimate or have a better idea of what our savings would be or is. In addition to that, the managing or keeping electronic medical record system updated, a pharmacist, a pharmacy technician, 2 custodians, and in addition, we would partner up with a lab, and which is what they offer over at Mesquite ISD. They partner up with Quest Diagnostics. What they did, is they provided a space where a phlebotomist is available for employees to provide lab work orders or, do the blood drawing as needed. So that will not be a staff part of Socorro ISD, though we are anticipating to build that relationship to where we would have someone on site as well. So as Mr. Reza said, what is the estimated cost? We're looking at, and again, this is to someone or a school district, an employer our size. The startup fee is $167,000. That would include furniture, equipment, and so on. The fixed cost annually, $709,000. Variable cost is $439,000. Total approximate cost is 1.3 the first year. The subsequent approximate cost is 1.1. The annual average projected savings would be 1.4. And you'll see the next slide. This will be a little bit more sense why the numbers and why the subsequent cost 1.1, and then why the annual average projected savings 1.4. This is a table that Mr. Ironton was kind enough to provide to us so we could illustrate or provide you with a better illustration of what we would be looking at if we were to go with the site that we are contemplating. So to my surprise, before I get to that, let me also let you know that we did bring over the pay scale that is used by Mesquite ISD to be able to compensate those positions that I mentioned earlier. And I know that illustration was not that readable, but here is a copy of those first 4 boxes, the last 3 tables. And we do have some information that relates to pay grades in the El Paso area. So we are making some additional research in regard to those pay scales. Though to my surprise, coming back from that trip and doing the research and going over the information, we, Mr. Ianton, Mr. Reza, Mr. Campoya, Mr. Padilla, who am I missing? Myself, Sylvia, sorry, Sylvia. Oh, did you take a picture so I can tweet? Because I'm low on tweets. You did? Okay, good. I'm very low. Yes, thank you. So, for those of you that don't already know, this is a location that is by Socorro High School. I'm sorry, Socorro, Mangwood High School. I apologize for that. And so we get to the site, and again, this is information that Mr. Ianton was kind enough to provide to us. This is a copy of the floor plan of the building you just saw. And to my pleasant surprise, I thought, wait a minute, all that cost that I was running through my head, we already have a building. In addition to that, through our walkthrough, we have a reception area, we have a lobby, we have a nurse's station to include storage area. We have an area that's considered to be for vital signs or an exam room that could be utilized for phlebotomy services. We have 8, not 4, not 6, 8 exam rooms, office space, 3 offices, an area that could possibly become the pharmacy. And as you see that area, it includes a conference room. So we're anticipating to readjust or reconfigure that area to become the pharmacy. And where you see the waiting area, the side towards the waiting area would be the windows where our employees will receive their prescriptions. In addition to that, we have, since we're looking at the electronic management system for medical records, there will be no need for a filing room, so that could be reconfigured to become the conference room now. So we did a walkthrough and we took some pictures. This is a clinic. In my head, I'm thinking, wait a minute, that money that I was thinking of, the lease, remodel, you name it, furniture and so on, we have a nurse's station. We have restrooms, water fountains. We have examining rooms. We have the employees. So what we have anticipated as cost may not reach that point, but yet that's information that we don't know yet, because we will need the assistance of another business relationship or business partner, and I'll cover that in a few minutes. But I guess, as Mr. Campoya mentioned, we're at a point to where we believe, enough information to be able to bring additional information to the board members and, of course, Dr. Espinosa, and we're ready to move forward with whatever decision you all might consider to make. But then during the annual custodial meeting, Mr. Campoya, while he was on stage, posed a question to the group, and he said, by a show of hands, how many of you, if we were to open a clinic at the Monwood side, and he asked, do all of you know where that school is and that site is, and most of them nodded, yes, we do. If we were to open a clinic, how many of you will visit that clinic and seek medical treatment? Because one of our main concerns of administration is, once we open the clinic, are they going to show up? Are they coming over? We have emergency units opening here and there. UMC just opened their clinic as well by the Loop, you name it. But then we think, if Mesquite ISD is able to have a clinic going on 11 years, Garland ISD looked into that as well, and they opened their clinic. If we look at those areas, they have a lot more resources than what we have in this service area. Yeah, competition might be less or greater, but we have the resources. And if we were to establish that good relationship, provide good customer service, and be loyal to them, then it's a good representation of that possible loyalty. I'm hoping that the picture does just, go ahead.
Would use the clinic.
The clinic, yes, yes, this is that picture. No, I don't.
We're not real sure if he didn't ask who's ready to go to lunch.
So this gave us, am I in the wrong spot again? This is what gave us a better representation of what we could possibly be looking into. Because if this is our population that perhaps they may not go see a doctor when they have a cough or a sore throat or I don't know, fever, because they have a deductible. Why am I going to go seek treatment if I know that I need to go see a doctor? I'll wait off. I'll go away. Well, I'll call in sick for a couple of days. But I'll never forget what Dr. Felta said. Those type of conditions could possibly become a chronic condition later on. So early detection and disease management is key, and perhaps that's one thing that we will need to keep in mind to further develop this service to our employees. This is the other picture that we took because Mr. Campoya didn't know how to take a panoramic picture, so he took two pictures of the audience. But again, it's a good illustration of what we could possibly be seeing, because they see the value of it. They see that this is something where the employer is showing the investment, that we're not only increasing premiums, that we're not only increasing deductibles and so on, but we're also making the effort to look for other tools to be able to assist them become a healthier Team ISD. Yes.
Just a little reasoning behind the picture. You know, in our minds, we always believe that the Monwood area may be too far for employees that work, for example, at the warehouse maintenance and operations, Ernesto Serna, Campestre, Rojas. You know, custodians don't make as much, and we think, okay, well, for them to drive up there is going to take them a while. So while I was on stage, I did explain that to them, and I asked them, do you all know where Monwood area is? And for those of you that work in the Valley, if you're going to go to this clinic and pay $10 as opposed to your doctor, how many of you would go to the clinic? So that's just an illustration that they're all for it. After that meeting, they went into a break, and some of them went up to me and started telling me, you know what, that is a great idea. You know, so and this is just custodians that we asked that question to.
Get up there anymore like you used to. Now you get up there pretty quick. So. No, West Side's a whole different monster on itself.
So what is our next step, or what is the intent of the presentation today, as Mr. Campoya mentioned earlier? How do we move forward? Are we okay to proceed with an RFQ, an RFP, establish a partnership with a consulting firm that will assist with the implementation and financial projections of the clinic, define revenue based on procedures, because of course we will need to identify specifically what type of services do we want to make available through the clinic, because based on that, then we will need supplies, equipment, and so on and so forth. Pre-opening expenditures and operating cash needs. How much money do we need to actually open the clinic? Credentialing. In addition to the staffing configuration, if we're hiring a physician, we need to be compliant with credentialing, licensing, and so on and so forth. Workspace and workflow assessment and design. As I said, we did a walkthrough, and of course, to me, the clinic looks great, even though it might need a little bit of maintenance. But for someone who opens clinics for a living, then they, of course, would see something that I possibly missed. Research and selection of electronic medical record system. There's several vendors out there, and of course, we will need to seek guidance for that in terms of efficiency, cost, and so on. Research and selection of revenue cycle management system. That's your billing system. That's how we track down number of visits, type of visits, and so on. Marketing, which is crucial if this is the new venture for us. Advertisement, word of mouth. We are the best tool to make that type of advertisement, and go out there, visit our schools, and make them aware once this is again up and running. Other service provider agreements, such as laboratory. Again, as I mentioned, depending on the type of services that we end up providing, we might need to have a service agreement with a lab or a phlebotomist. Not necessarily something that's going to cost the school district, but an agreement where we agree to provide a space so they can make the services available to our employees. In addition to this, of course, a pharmacy is something that will need to be compliant in terms of HIPAA, security, because of course there will be prescriptions in that specific area and so on and so forth. I don't know if at this point there are any questions that I could possibly answer. Again, this is preliminary, and we will still need some other information to bring forth, look at costs, salaries, pay scales, and so on and so forth.
Okay, here you got a lot of questions. So who's first? Mr. Gonzalez.
If we were to, I think you, and I may be wrong here, you had 6 or 8 employees on that clinic. Two, 4, 9 employees. What would a private practice that is going to start to put a practice out there in El Paso would make or pretend to make out of, going into the business? And I'm saying this in relation to what does the doctor expect to get paid? Who's going to ensure that if there's any malpractice or anything like that, is going to be responsible for that? So, in more or less in dollars and cents, what are we talking about?
That's a really good question, and I can come back and provide those numbers, but I can answer one of them. When it comes to malpractice insurance, that runs about $3,000 to $4,000 annually, and if we were to employ a physician, that could be part of what we provide to that individual.
So we would be responsible for
Providing the insurance.
If the staff was to be our own staff, yes, we would be responsible for a complaint, a grievance, and so on.
So, and the other, I no idea, when I go to see my doctor, I have no idea how much he makes, but obviously he makes a lot of money.
Right, and we do have some numbers available. We don't know if at possible another workshop we can better illustrate what the compensation rate will be for the El Paso area.
Well, but that doctor not only makes a lot of money, but also has a lot of overhead.
Absolutely, yes.
That staff is the doctor,
Yes.
so we're going to be able to eliminate some of that.
Absolutely, yes. So I'll give you a scenario when it comes to a typical office visit. So let's say that right now a physician is making from the plan or through the plan for, I don't know, just a regular consultation, from $80 to $145. That's what we would pay as a plan. If the staff is part of our staff and there's no other person to be paid in between the school district and the healthcare provider, and for that we're anticipating that to be able to supply services to an employee is $45, then that's our cost. We could possibly already save 2/3 of what we were spending if someone was to seek treatment elsewhere.
I guess I'm trying to put myself on the other side. If I am the doctor and I stand to make $2 million a year and only $500,000 over here, why would I go there?
That's a really good question. Why would a physician agree to work with the school district? It's like,
Don't make that
Well,
mistake.
I'm not saying that that's how much they make. I have no idea.
Oh, if he
what
shows
I'm
you the
trying-
pay scale, you'll be surprised what this
What-
doctor makes.
what
Can
I'm
you bring
trying
up the
to-
pay scale?
yes.
Look at what this doctor makes.
So this is what is being compensated by Mesquite ISD.
But she has no overhead, no staff.
How many days is that, Mr. Carmona?
200, yes.
Well, she said she worked all year and got 2 weeks vacation or 3 weeks vacation.
So at midpoint,
Monday through Friday, 7 to 5.
Or something.
226.
Yeah, let's just do 226. That's
Well, for the family practitioner, for a doctor, what I'm trying to say is that,
Well, yeah, but that's the type of doctor that will be employed here, family practitioner.
Yeah.
Or a general practitioner,
not
or
a-
an
Yeah.
internist, nothing more, not a specialist.
Not a cardiologist
No.
or something like that.
Not-
It'd be a GP.
Right, we're,
Then Mr. Carmona did some research as to what do doctors make in El Paso, because we always think, okay, well, that market is different than El Paso. And you want to share
Sure.
what you found.
So I'll just give you one source, Indeed, which is where a lot of salary information is posted for different positions and so on throughout the nation. For El Paso, the salary ranges from 75,000 all the way up to 166,737, depending on the employer. The Salud y Vida reported a physician making just that amount, 166,737 per year. The average in the area is 101,702. So, based on the pay scale that we receive from Mesquite ISD and information such as this, pay grades, we can more or less come up with something comparable. And to elaborate on why would a physician agree to work with a school district and possibly make less money, like Dr. Feltas mentioned, from the clinic and Mesquite ISD, it's convenience. She gets to work Monday to Friday, able to spend time with her children, not be pressured to make a certain number of visits, produce certain number of revenue, and so on and so forth. So as I know, working for a school district has its perks. She said it may not be a money-making type of job as a physician, but I'm certainly gaining in other areas to where I can spend time with my family. So I think that in her case, for her as a physician, it's a win-win.
I have is that the quality of a practitioner, being that one that is making more out there, are we going to get an entry-level position from the university?
No.
That's a good question. We would need to work with a consulting firm to see what they suggest. That's not one thing that we're anticipating, to have someone who just came out of school or the university. But who's to say? I'm far from being a consultant, but who's to say that someone who just came out of school is not perhaps as passionate or sufficient for someone who's been in practice for 20 years? So we would need to rely on whatever information we get from the consultant and then bring that information forth to the board.
To give you an idea, Mesquite ISD hired a search firm similar to what was the board hired for the superintendent search to hire Dr. Feltes. And she is experienced and high quality individual.
Yeah, but Mesquite versus El Paso, the levels are a lot different. There's a lot more revenue and a lot of more money in Mesquite than it is in El Paso.
Exactly. But we would use the same format.
So then this is attractive.
Well, I don't know. Without having numbers, I wouldn't know.
Mr. Carmona, just a point of clarification, and it may be semantics, but I just want to be sure that everybody's clear. You mentioned the multi-year plan for the health insurance. We didn't approve the multi-year plan. We were presented a multi-year plan, and we approved year one, and each subsequent year will be considered based on the information and the performance of the first year, et cetera. So I just want to be sure that everybody understands that that's what we did. But beyond that, did we do open records requests on these clinics just to see what their startup costs are? What, because something that I don't see factored in there, and I happen to know a little about things like this.
Just a little?
Just a little. Practice management systems don't need separate revenue cycle management systems. It's incorporated into one. It's a complete practice management system. So that would be different. This clinic would look drastically overstaffed for me. As a matter of fact, 32 patients in a single day, most doctors see 32 patients before lunch. So to see 32 patients in a day is that's a walk in the park for the physician, all the additional staff. I wonder Samaritan, all those pharmacies, or the Advantage pharmacies that we partner with, and we also have the mail order prescriptions, so, I mean, why would we do something like that? I also question employing the physician, because to me, in my mind, I've been, well, I've worked in hospitals, so we had employee clinics, right? The employee clinic didn't replace my primary care provider. It was out of convenience. It replaced me going to Summit. It replaced me going to the urgent care or to the emergency room care. It even allowed for screening, is this something that I need to go to the emergency room? Fortunate enough, I had to go to the emergency room. They could wheel me down there because it was, right on campus, but it never replaced my primary care provider because you want that relationship. We don't establish relationships with the providers at Summit. That is a convenience physician, not the physician who is going to take care of every single, need. And yes, for sure, some people will see this physician as their primary care provider, but those are the same people that are going to Summit and using Summit as their primary care provider. So the risk, I think, is that if we hire a physician, and this isn't successful for us because we're in the business of educating kids, not providing medical treatment, to individuals, even our employees. That's not our business. Our core function is education of children. So why would we undertake something like this that we know absolutely nothing about? Why not bring in a company that we contract with, just like we do everything else? Well, specialized. We hire an attorney. And they take care of every single aspect. It's not internal counsel, it's external counsel. They have their own practice management system. They handle their documents. They do all their document processing. All of that is internal to them, not us. And so I don't see this as any different. I think, if this is a venture that we're going into, which I think it is, it may be temporary, it should be a contract that makes it easy for us to get out of as well. The fact that we're going to have, what happens when the family practitioner, when our primary practitioner gets sick? Are we going to close the clinic? If we employ the physician, yeah, guess what? We're going to close the clinic because we don't have a physician. And we don't have a contract that says a sick physician is your problem, not mine. You need to provide somebody who staffs this place, so that people who need to come in, will be there. Those are startup costs as far as wellness. I mean, I think we also, the wellness location, I think we need to be careful there as well because it was a clinic, so I don't think we need to change it. I don't think it was a functioning clinic. That's exactly what was there. That's what it was doing. If we give someone, a checkbook and say, here's the space, what do you think? We all do that, right? When we buy a house that existed and we know we've got a budget, well, I want to paint the walls and I don't like the color of that counter and, I need access here, but we know that it was a clinic. So, that space should be able to, the only reason that clinic closed is because, the lease terminated. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but when we closed it, it was a functioning clinic. It could have continued to this day if the circumstances were right. So, I think that's one of the things that we have to remember as well in startup costs. I know there's things that we haven't considered in listening to the presentation, but there's also things that we don't need to consider because, that building there was a clinic. I do think the number of visits is overestimated because, again, I don't think, that visits seem to be total number of primary care visits. Again, I don't foresee people replacing their primary doctor. It's an inconvenience to replace your primary practitioner. I mean, we get upset when we change insurances from one to the other, and our physician that we've been going to for 5, 10, 15, 50 years, is no longer part of the plan. People get up in arms. So us opening the clinic isn't going to change any of that. Again, I think it's the Summit visits. Did we consider visiting El Paso District? It's my understanding, and I looked it up. They have an employee clinic. So we went to Garland. We went to...
Well, I did. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Nakira. I did get in touch with the benefits director over at EPISD, and she informed me that their clinic closed. One of the reasons why, or the main reason why, is because they did exactly what you just explained. They extended a contract with a private practice. It was staffed for a number of years. Then as they saw the potential, initially it was, I was lucky enough to be there employed by them while the clinic opened. Initially it was open as an employee health clinic, but yet the operations were handled by exactly what you just explained, by a private practice. They had a standing service agreement. So at the end of the day, as the years progressed, she explained to me that the doctor opened the clinic, since it was their practice, technically speaking, to the public. That's where the relationship was broken. That's where the loyalty and the customer service relationship that had been established, the idea of the employees, we have a clinic, went south. So eventually that clinic, and of course, they became TRS Active Care and so on, so they lost many of the reasons why they had originally opened the clinic. In addition to that, you mentioned if physicians...
Mr. Carmona,
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
sorry, you said that the clinics in EPISD closed?
That's what the Ms. Elizabeth Buldos mentioned to me, yes.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I start my job on Monday, and I have 3 clinics that I can go to that are district sponsored. One is within central office,
Is it the one located in the planetarium?
I believe so.
Okay.
And then there's one, and it's I believe the name of it is WellMed on Traywood, and then they've got one on the west side. So there is still that's what I was told like a few days ago.
Yeah, and there might be another service agreement with WellMed, but it's not EPIS's clinic anymore.
But and I just want to make it clear that in the benefits package, that is the clinic that you can go to and receive, it's at no cost to the employee and walk-in basis. Pardon me? I want to say, and I've got the paperwork in the car, so I can go pick it up and look at it. But I don't remember her saying that they would do that. I don't know.
On their website.
Yeah.
I said it still. I looked it up real quick because I wasn't. I thought maybe I didn't. I asked Ms. Rodriguez here because I remembered something about an employee clinic, and I looked it up and it's still there. It's possible that their website is outdated, but
I was
And
there
it's
a
also-
couple of days ago.
And it's also possible that between then and now, there's a service agreement with another healthcare provider that is servicing the clinic as well. But to me, it sounds like it's a partnership to where the clinic is an extension of WellMed. I'm assuming that they're using the space to be able to provide the services to the employees. So what I'm envisioning is it's almost like someone opening their practice inside their building, but it's not necessarily a clinic where it's considered to be from El Paso Independent School District because they're not providing the supplies, they're not hiring technically speaking, the staff based on utilization and so on. It's just another WellMed clinic. That's what it sounds to me.
right. But I think I think those are all contract stipulations that we can, mandate. Mr. Carmona, do you foresee that this clinic would only see employees? Would it only see folks who are covered by our insurance? Who would it see? Because we have employees who have coverage through their employers. We have employees who cover, their kids, their family. So who would be treated?
We are contemplating to only offer services to those individuals that are insured under our health plan, whether it's an employee, their spouse, or their dependents.
Yeah. Okay, and that actually eases my mind because if we offer services to anybody else, then we run into all sorts of other healthcare reporting requirements, which further complicate, the management of a practice. I think, overall, I like the idea. There's things certainly in the presentation that I think, require some additional consideration. I, would like to talk to different. Mr. Carmona, why did we only talk to school districts? An employee health clinic is an employee health clinic. You know, why not talk to other large employers in the area who manage their own or provide clinics to their employees? I think it is applicable beyond, especially, you know, I looked up the population real quick of Garland. It's like 250,000. I looked up Mesquite. It's like 160,000. So I would even question whether they have, you know, the urgent care providers popping up like we do here, because I know the market that those places pop up in, and they're, you know, in cities, not, you know, they're not going to pop up in Fort Stockton. There might not even pop up in Las Cruces, but there are definitely going to be plenty of them here in El Paso, because it's the demographic, it's the market that fits for them. So, you know, I know as far as operations go, et cetera, you know, those two districts are okay. And how did they go about it? Because, yeah, we're an organization, we're similar organizations, but as far as employee clinics go and costs, you know, when you introduce a pharmacy, you need you know, you start to need the medicine cabinets. You know, there's just a whole bunch of things that you start to need that, you know, we maybe shouldn't go. So you know, the startup cost of the other ones for me would be of interest. But again, talking to other folks here on both ends, those who employ their physicians and those who have contracted, you know, to understand the differences, I think would be good. And then, you know, clean the numbers. I think let's look at actual summit visits, because I think, or urgent care visits or emergency room care visits that don't meet urgent care. You know, all our level 1 visits, which they should be coming here for treatment or to a clinic like this, to their family practitioner instead of to the emergency room. I think, you know, that subset there. And I do think it all boils down to, in spite of, you know, the feel-good approach of that physician, for us it's a financial decision. It has to be. You know, again, our core business is educating children. It's not providing medical treatment. And if there's absolutely no cost savings, and cost savings quickly, then there's no reason for us to even venture into this. I mean, again, it's a great idea. It's highly convenient, you know, but you know, well, I'm not saying we. I complain anytime public education funds are redirected to private schools, to charter schools, to anything other than public education. I'm not going to support redirecting funds that can be used for education to a clinic. That's just not what we're supposed to be doing. So there has to be a cost benefit to doing this. And if it's in the cost of what our claims are, because, you know, definitely doing the math. You know, when we go to a family practitioner or to Summit, my copay is not $25, it's $75. That's, I'm sorry, my insurance, not the district's, but it's $75. So what does that tell me? It tells me that the actual cost for the visit to my insurer is higher too. And so if I go to an employee clinic, you know, and it's $10, that means the cost of that visit is cheaper as well. So, you know, I definitely know that there's going to be some cost benefit there, but we just have to be sure, you know, that really is the pendulum that shifts the balance, the cost.
And during the, as you mentioned, the review and approval of phase 1 of what we proposed in terms of changes to the plan, we mentioned that our goal is not to break or pull those relationships, primary care physicians that have been already established. That's not what we are intent. Our intent is for those individuals that are not seeking primary care services and establish those relationships and bring that population into seek services that eventually our goal is to prevent those chronic conditions and disease management. So again, if there is a population who has already established a relationship for a primary care with a primary care physician, that's not our goal. That's not necessarily something that we are looking into. In addition to Summit, if we have claims data in regard to Summit, the other urgent care clinics around the area, that's good information, but yet we're looking at those other individuals that potentially are not seeking treatment and that we know that we have documented have a potential to develop a chronic illness and, you know, look at that potential cost. But again, it's not to, it will be practically impossible to think that we will be able to see in a clinic over a month with a number of 14,000 visits within a year. It doesn't happen. It's not our goal. But again, for us, it's important to see the potential, because if that was to be the number of visits that we were to service in that location, that would translate eventually into savings. The savings will not be immediate. The savings will be reflected possibly within the first year, 2 years. But again, it will be a matter of whatever effort we make to market and advertise the services and how well that's received by our population.
Well, I was able to join the team when we did the site visit, and a couple of things come to bear. I'll try to address some of the points that have been made from my observations but one of the things had to do with the clinic fee. Because it would be our clinic, there would not be a copay, there would be a clinic fee. So that immediately pulls out the copay, pulls out the insurance cost. Right now, when one of our employees goes to the doctor and their insurance pays, even though they pay their copay and the insurance pays, that means money has to have been put in there by the employee and by us in order to cover whatever cost that is. And we pay a third-party administrator to manage that. All that would go away because we own the physician, we own the clinic, we own the staff, we own the materials. So the employee would pay. One of the things that was remarkable to me that the doctor there mentioned is that from time to time, they get employees in the lower pay scale that everybody catches a cold. And it's at the end of the pay period, and sometimes we have to admit that some of our custodians, bless you, some of our custodians, some of our CNS workers are kind of working paycheck to paycheck. And so they're getting close to paycheck, and all 4 people in their family are sick, and they can't go to their private care physician because it may cost them $100, $25 a piece, or whatever their copay is. And so consequently, sometimes those children's illnesses may develop to something worse, more of a pneumonia, more of a worse cold, because they were just not able to be seen, where $10 is a lot more palatable, particularly those employees that were not using a PCP. One of the things we learned from our insurance briefing that we got before is we have a large number of employees not going to doctors, not establishing PCP relationships. And one of the things that was remarkable, particularly, and we saw 3 clinics. We did see a corporate one. We saw Cigna. I understand JCPenney has their own clinic too, but we did see a corporate one. One of the things that was remarkable was the importance of hiring your doctor. It's similar like some of the big places like the Mayo Clinic, University of Pennsylvania, those places where the physicians are committed to the work here and not how many patients I get through. You're correct. A GP will see 32 patients before lunch, and when I used to go to a doctor like that, you'd have to grab them to ask a question because, what do you need? What do you got? Okay, bye. I'll send the nurse in. And so these people were very much involved, some of the things that they mentioned, in managing the disease process of their employees. When you go to your pharmacist, I don't know how many of you do, I don't know the name of my pharmacist. They establish those relationships with employees so that if you have questions about your medications, that pharmacist, they have a separate consultation window. They can say, this is why these medications are given. This is why you should stay on your medications. What oftentimes caught my attention is they said the importance of this clinic is that we're treating our coworkers. These are our friends and our family and our coworkers. It's important for us to be able to treat them appropriately. So there was a cost. You mentioned in reference to the pharmacy, why have it? Well, one was the relationship, 2 was the convenience of very rapidly getting the prescriptions. What I'm thinking on the back end of that, it's going to take us $250,000 to stock this pharmacy. We checked with them their security measures for narcotics, the pull-down gauge to secure the pharmacy, and so forth. It requires 3 licenses, and they're sequential. And so, but we asked them in reference to those things. The other thing I'm thinking is, we have a number of employees on very expensive medications. What would be our cost savings if now we buy those medications at wholesale prices and they get them from our pharmacy? You know, we've got hepatitis B medications, I understand, are $10,000 a month. What if we bought those at wholesale through our pharmacy and made those available to our employees? Because we know our pharmacy cost is going through the roof. We've talked about mail order and so forth. This pharmacy provided that. There was a vested interest by the physician, the staff, to treat the patients. And of all the plans we saw, hiring the physician made the most sense because this lady took a vested interest in her clinic. She's a district employee. And she actually had taken over for another doctor. And what you asked about what happens when the doctor leaves or the doctor is sick. Well, if you notice on the staffing, there is a nurse practitioner. somebody's gonna be there. In their case, and they're smaller than us, they have 2 nurse practitioners. And by the way, all 3 of them work most of the time to provide patient care. They do EKGs. Their service is closer to a summit than a doctor's office, because the clinic at Isleta's headquarters is more of a doctor's office. Very, very little services that would be available to the employees. They do vaccines where Garland won't do it. They do all the lab work. The lab work would be billed to the insurance, but they provide the lab. They have Quest. They provide the staff, and Quest provides all the test tubes and all the materials. So there's no additional cost to the district. They run the test through there, and so consequently, they get they build a community service, and they build a great customer service and relationship with the employees. So the employees actually want to come back there. They have a relationship there, and I think the cost savings is even bigger because now, again, we're still going to be collecting a clinic fee. That's kind of minimal but we already know our fixed costs because we own everybody. And then if they move on, like I was going to elaborate, when she took over for another doctor, she's been there a number of years, 6, 7, 8 years. There was a break in service. And what they did is while they were recruiting a new doctor, the nurse practitioner saw the patients, and they pulled in on a contract a doctor to oversee the nurse practitioners. So there was no break in service. That's your fallback in case a doctor gets seriously ill, gets offered, a great, very lucrative job. This lady was very optimistic because she said the carrot here for the doctors and the pharmacists is that we work Monday through Friday, roughly 7 to 5:30. We get to be with our family. We get to share with our family, and consequently, we can give better service to our employees. I think this would bring a lot of our employees that are not doing healthcare into the picture. I think by us owning the staff, by the way, their staff was double this. They had 19 employees and the same space that we have by square footage. By us having this advantage, it'll bring more people to healthcare, and it is going to save us money or at least stem the growth of our costs down the road. And by having control of the employees, if it doesn't work out tomorrow, we say thank you very much, but we no longer need you. These people would be on yearly contracts like everybody else is, so that we could kind of look at these things. But there's cost savings on the medications. There's cost savings in service, the customer service, the actually establishing these relationships with the employees that I saw at this clinic. They kept talking about these are our employees and we're vested in taking care of them. They did everything from your cold and so forth, abscess drainage. They did some splints. They did EKGs. They did the full gamut of lab work. Some of the patients actually that didn't have a PCP were using them as a PCP to follow up on their diabetes. We know that's huge and important. They were kind of pointing out very early on problems with obesity, problem with lab work that they needed to start being referred to specialists. And so consequently, I think one of the thoughts I had when we were visiting is we really are at a point, we've talked about this for some time, that we need either hopefully encourage to push forward or hold back. And my thought is, one of the things that they recommended to us is that we get a consultant that opens clinics. You're correct, our business is education. This would be a big savings to our healthcare, I believe anyway. Hire a consultant that can tell us all the things we need to know. At Garland, I facetiously said, why? Because you started and didn't have Band-Aids, and the lady started laughing. Yeah, somebody forgot to order Band-Aids, And so, those kinds of things to cover those bases and what record management system we need. The very next thing we need to have in place, there is an advisory committee that I recommend be members of our staff, maybe some public input that would, on an ongoing basis, discuss services, hours, and the role of the clinic. And as soon as we do that, and then we get a search firm to hire a doctor, the doctor and the pharmacist would be part of that advisory committee, so that are we on track with what we want to do with our employees for the growth? When all of us are gone from the board, down the road, this has a steady process. One of the big things that's going to be here, and I'll tell you, and that we saw, the success of this clinic 100% is the culture of the clinic staff. It's going to mean the demeanor, the expertise, the knowledge, the willingness of that doctor to grow. They were very clear that be careful hiring a doctor by contract, because at some point the doctor says, based on what you pay me, I only see 8 patients a day. You're not paying me enough to grow this practice. We don't want that. We want somebody that, one, would be our employee, but number 2, that has a vested interest in growing the healthcare of our clinic. Same thing with the pharmacist, someone that says, come on in, let me talk to you about your breathing medication, your antibiotics. when we looked at, they were very forthcoming in giving us numbers there, kind of off the cuff. They had their books there. You would think we were doing a site visit. They had their big binders there. Their feeling was, and I'm quoting, if you're self-funded, this is a no-brainer. You're going to save money. You're going to do better benefit for your employees, and it'll be huge in the long run. But I think this consultant and so forth would be good. Based on what I saw 3 of the clinics. I've heard the things about Isleta. El Paso, I know they have satellite clinics, but I've heard if you go to one, and then the next time you happen to be on the other side of town and you go to the other one, they say, well, we can't do the same thing because you need to go to the first one you went. And I hear that as a negative. I know the city of El Paso has a similar thing. But what I saw, and I mean, clinics are in my wheelhouse, and managing these types of things. I really was impressed with the Mesquite model. I was not impressed with the Cigna model. And the Garland model, quite frankly, was a runny nose clinic. And so I would highly recommend that we consider at least authorizing the administration to go to the next step forward, start getting a consultant on board, start seeing what we can afford, can't afford, while we retrieve the numbers that Mr. Nájera is talking about to see the cost effectiveness. I mean, they're telling me that the average doctor visit is $80 to $145 or so. I don't know if those people don't get a whole lot done, because every time I go down to Summit and for my sinus infection and get a prescription and 2 shots, it's much more than that. Now it would be the $10 clinic fee, and the rest of it, us as a district and the employee wouldn't have to pitch it in out of their insurance cost, and hopefully our cost there would lower down, or at least to the point that our having to raise the premiums on the employees would slow down significantly. I'm impressed if they think they can make this thing be in the black within a year and a half to 2 years. I really think we need to commit to like a 3-year, 5-year project, because these things, under the best circumstances, do take a little bit of time. That's my thoughts of what I got to observe. I mean, if I can help with any questions on what I saw or didn't see there, I'd be glad to share that with you. But the staff loved their job. It was evident, and the patients were reflected in that too.
Mr. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Gonzalez, may I just real quick?
Sure.
Mr. Ayub, I just wanted to add to yours. I like that idea, and I'm glad that you differentiated between a runny nose clinic and something that's a bit more full service. I tried to make the differentiation, but I didn't make it as well as you did, because we're competing against Summit. And unless we can provide, we're not competing against primary care providers. Those who don't have them, yeah, we'll replace it. We will become their primary care. But what we're trying to do is redirect the people who are going to Summit to the urgent care, to the mid-level there. We're trying to bring them here so that we realize that savings. If we're not going to commit to providing similar services, then we're doomed from the very beginning. So, yeah.
And I'm thinking the one carrot I saw here between us and Summit is that if I go to Summit, I got to go to Walgreens and get my prescription. If I go to the SISD clinic, I'm going to see my doctor, maybe get my shots there, get my prescription, grab it, and go home or go back to work because I'm miserable. So it would be one added step. And I may be wrong. Pharmacy is not necessarily 100% in my wheelhouse, but I just wonder what the markup on pharmaceuticals is. And once we own the pharmacy, we're buying that stuff at wholesale.
Sorry, Mr. Gonzalez.
Yeah, when I heard the presentation you had, one of the points that you made was that it was not going to be a money maker. What I want to find out is how much of a homemaker it's going to be. One, we're having a $5 million or $3.5 million deficit, and without any numbers as to how much it's going to cost me, or what are we going to do with all this if it's going to end up in the end that we're going to be wasting the money of a taxpayer? I don't have a very good feeling about that.
That's a good observation, Mr. Gonzalez. And that's the reason why we're contemplating hiring a consultant. In addition to that, I forgot to mention I believe it was either Mr. Nájera or Ms. Rodriguez's question, we have already processed a open records request to get information in regard to the financial service agreements and so on from EPIZ, Isleta, Garland, and Mesquite ISD. So once we have that information, we'll be able to share that with, in terms of what you made reference to cost, initial cost, operating cost, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and the other thing I would like to get some. Yes, sir. Oh, the other thing I would like to have some idea is that in how much of that hole is going to be there? Can we sustain it? Or Mr. Reza can tell us, how much of a hole we can sustain. Like, for instance, the SAC is a worthy thing that we have, and we should keep on going for that. But there's only so many holes that we can keep on providing before we go under. Thank you.
Mr. Gandara, just a comment, and I think going back to Mr. Ayub's comment, I was also, as we're listening to the presentation, I was thinking, having a pharmacy, what would be the point? But obviously, I've been to the doctor enough for the past year to make up for anybody in this room. But one of the things that I was sharing with Mr. Nájera was, the fact, and just again, thinking about the pharmacy being right there, the fact that if a person can go get their shot and get their prescription filled right then and there, oh, I can't tell you how many times I go to the doctor, I've got a sinus infection or whatever, I get my shot, they give me my prescription for an antibiotic, and I just want to go home. And then I forget to get that prescription filled, and then I drop it off on the way home, and then it's like, oh, I forgot to go pick it up. Now it's 7:30 in the evening, 8 o'clock in the evening. I don't want to get back up. So at first I was really thinking, like, why would we have a pharmacy? But again, some of the medications that I take are not available at the local pharmacist, at any of them. I have to go through a specialty pharmacy, those kinds of things. And, God willing, nobody has to go through that. But I think for the antibiotics, the stuff that, again, for some of the acute illnesses that you need right then and there, I think that, again, just thinking that, thank you, Mr. Ayub, for putting that into perspective, because I thought, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that part.
And if I may, related to that point, one of the highlights of the pharmacy, again going back to Dr. Feltes and the pharmacist, the pharmacy manager, initially the pharmacy opened under the assumption that they were going to be mainly focusing on generics. One, it's a zero cost to the employee, it's convenient, it's available, they're able to follow up and see if in fact they're taking the medication based on the number of visits, and so on and so forth. But it has evolved to the point to where they're supplying 90 days, to where physicians, their primary care physicians, are allowed to fax in their 90-day supply order directly into the pharmacy. So again, like Mr. Nájera said, yes, we're not in the business of opening or managing clinics, but it's a good benefit. It seems to be working for many school districts, many other employers, private employers. I believe someone mentioned, I'm sorry, JCPenney, and I know that also I have a friend that works at ADP. That's one of their, their highlights. They just walk downstairs and I'm sorry, now it's a different building. They go up to see the physician, and so on and so forth. So, there is definitely a value to it that could be considered.
Thank you. Is there any more questions? Well, thank you for the presentation. We really
Can
do
they move
appreciate
forward to get a quorum?
Thank you.
It's not on the
Yeah.
agenda.
On the agenda, but we'll look into it.
Well, not vote for it, but let them continue on because they need to get more information. That was the purpose. Yeah, not vote on it.
There's nothing else on our agenda. Our meeting is now over at 7:52.
Era tiempo.
¿Cómo hablan? It was Mr. Carmona, man. I thought for a minute.